welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. We are finally back with the season 2 premiere here with my co-host Janice, and we are breaking down episode 1 for you. And I have to say, I was pretty excited to see this back. Even the tone with the colors, and I love that you have that background because those colors on those buildings are so bright and they're so vibrant, and everything was so clean and nice.
Yeah,
and I like that this was a setup episode.
Yes, kind of modernization of the look, at least, for the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's much prettier environment.
And they didn't waste any time jumping into the question on every single fan's mind. And so we start off in Antigua, and obviously Theo or Sydney has died. Now at first I knew that Sydney was going to die. Obviously, I think most of the fandom knew, even though I was talking with someone about it and they said they weren't sure why they were shocked that he died, because they sort of knew he was dying. But
it's the seeing it.
Yes, that it threw them.
And let me say real quick, it's not like they show him dying.
No.
We just see a funeral procession that starts even before the credits are run.
Yep. And we see blood on the sheets, and then we finally see his coffin being buried in, it says Sydney Barker.
Right.
The blood on the sheets at first, though, because it was before, I knew that Sydney was going to die, obviously, but I thought the blood on the sheets, like in childbirth is what I was thinking. I was like, oh, this is Eliza's death. And I thought they were going to show hers first, and they didn't kill her off.
No.
I wanted her death.
Well, sorry. I don't think we'll see her, but
no,
they haven't killed off the character, at least.
Exactly. So I did have an issue in the first time we see Charlotte. I didn't like that the hair was so free on most of the girls, and like her and her sister. The other girls had their hair up, and Charlotte had her hair free, no covering, no nothing, no hair up, no. It just
no. Her sister's hair was down too.
I know her and her sister were the two that had it down, but the other women had it up, and it was messy because they were dancing. But I
think they were trying to make the point of it's a relaxed environment in Willingdon, because we see them at a country ball, as it were, and she's smiling, and then of course what happens is Mary appears in the doorway, completely dressed in black, and Charlotte goes to see her, and we don't hear the conversation.
I actually kind of liked it that way.
Yes. Yeah, we just know from the reaction, and that they cry and hug, that she's telling her about Sydney.
Yeah. And I think that was a mercy by the writers to do it that way, because even now, like on our channel and on my YouTube channel and in our Facebook group, so many people are still begging for Theo to come back, and so many people are calling for Sydney to come back still. And the writers, they had to just be like, no, we're not going to spend the entire season on Sydney and his death. It would kill you. It would devastate you. So we're just
and that's exactly what Justin Young said in some interviews, is that once they knew that Theo was not coming back, they just didn't see any way that they could duplicate the chemistry that Theo and Rose had achieved in season 1 by recasting. And so they needed to put everything to rest with Sydney, in terms of with Charlotte, and so that the story and the fans could move on.
And that's exactly what was needed. We didn't need to hear Mary describe to her what happened, because we knew what would happen. We didn't need dialogue in there. And I like that it was just music, because that was the shining glory of season 1, even was the music by Ruth Barrett. So having the music overplay and set the tone for what was happening, we didn't need dialogue there.
Yeah, at least according to the credits, Ruth didn't really do these first 2 episodes, but a musician that worked with her did. So I'm sure she had lots of things going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, 2 years. It's been 2 years, so that makes sense. Now, I wanted to touch on the letter that we see. I want to know who was writing the letter, first of all, because it didn't, he looked like he was balding on top, and it almost looked like Hankins. It's not Hankins, because Hankins is obviously in Sanditon, but it didn't look like they were even trying to make it look like Sydney.
No, I'm sure it was some official that was left in Antigua after Sydney died.
Okay.
That was answering it. It could have been either a doctor or a pastor, because the procession, they show a pastor leading that procession.
And only
then
4 elderly men were the mourners.
Right. So besides the men that were carrying the casket, the either former slaves, one assumes, since we know that her sorry, I was going to say Crystal, but Georgiana's father released his slaves. So, but that's all we can assume. I mean, I think they purposely didn't make it be someone in particular. Just whoever was left, or maybe it was just an official, who took care of that.
And I was wondering if it was like an official on Sydney's end, or if that is the man that I wanted to call him Churlo, that Arthur and Tom sent out. So I wasn't sure whose side he was, if he was the one that Arthur and Tom sent, or if it was one that was left to handle Sydney's affairs.
I think the note that we see being written was somebody in Antigua informing them of what happened with Sydney. I think the letter they got later was a response from the person that they, well, no, because it wasn't until after that they sent somebody to investigate.
Yeah. So I pulled out some phrases that I could read from the letter, and it sounds almost like it's a Sydney letter. A little bit.
Really?
Yeah. So like some of the phrases were like, must show the courage. There's pieces that are missing from each phrase. So this doesn't really say anything. It's just the general tone and some of the things that were said, but it says must show the courage to keep, and then it blocks it out. And then it says, what is life for? Another part says, but the most urgent matter, and then blocked out. And it says, upon you is the, and then it blocks out. And then it says, I wish to, but I will try to in something else. And it says letters that you must, and I lack the strength to. So those are the only phrases you can see at all on there.
Well, then it's possible. I guess I didn't stop it to read that. But the only conclusion I would make from that is that it may be a letter that Sydney wrote when he knew he was dying. And
that's what I
then
thought.
One of the officials addressed it, told them the result and sent it to him.
Yeah, because it looks like he's packaging up that letter to send to Tom.
Yeah, we do discover later that Tom and Arthur had no idea none of them knew that he had gone to Antigua.
Yeah.
And we also discover later that he was there to settle some of Georgiana's affairs, not his own. Yeah. So
very curious how that's going to play out. And I think it's going to affect her sugar boycott.
Maybe.
I don't think it's going to affect, I think it's going to directly tie into that.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where they go with that. And when we get the information, because we don't really learn anything in the first 2 episodes in any kind of detail.
No. I like I said, I think these were necessary setup episodes. And I think I heard some complaints about how this seems just like filler, but with new characters coming in and old characters now gone, you have to set up why.
Right.
You can't just pretend those characters never existed, and you can't pretend like the characters coming in always existed. So you have to have some form of setup for this. And because there were so many different dynamics to explain, the first 2 episodes, it took that to explain it.
Right.
I mean, they didn't have another choice, really. They had to go in a different direction, so they had to set it up.
Yep, I agree.
What did you think of how Georgiana talked to her suitor, Lord Kingsley?
Oh yeah, I'd rather I'd sooner be boiled alive than to accept his proposal.
Yeah.
Well, I think she's gotten to that point where she suffers no fools, as they say. And she, and then her excuse is that, well, it's a virtue to be candid. And of course Mary says it's good to have tact. But I think it's setting us up for one of the other new characters that we meet, which is Lockhart.
Yeah.
Charles Lockhart.
I had a problem with his entrance too.
Oh yeah.
There is no way that man would walk around that town like that and no one would be surprised or shocked or bothered. There's no way.
Well, I think people were shocked and bothered
It
And
didn't
he
seem like
he
it.
was getting off on it. Certainly Allison was shocked. Her
I
face when he walks by.
I couldn't tell what
But
she said. She said something about clothes and parochial, but I couldn't. I missed it both
oh,
times when I watched it.
that was, she says, I feel so parochial with our closing. We must ask for some money
Okay, that's what
for
she
new
said.
gowns. That's what she said. But anyway, back to Georgiana's, how she treats this suitor. And of course, she later on says to Charlotte that she is besieged by fortune hunters.
Mhm.
And, obviously she's in a situation where she doesn't have Sydney there really running interference on things, sending away people, that kind of thing. And I'm sure her reputation in the town has grown as more strangers or more
Mhm.
newcomers have come to the town. But I think and when I say setting us up for Lockhart, because he says a devil may care attitude in terms
Yeah.
of other people's opinions. And she is doing that to some extent, although
Mhm.
his attitude is even surprises her.
Yeah. I think because she's cruel intentionally, and she has to like choose to be cruel, where Lockhart is very more, I just don't care. And I
Yeah,
think that she wants people to know this is who I am. And so I think that she chooses to be that way, where Lockhart is that's just how it comes out of his mouth.
I will say she is definitely more mature in this
Mm-hmm.
episode than when we saw before. And she has a sense of her own power,
Mm-hmm.
that these people want her
Yeah.
money. And so they're, bowing down to her or taking from her. She's allowed to speak in ways that the average person would not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that seeing Tom struggle to be her guardian and saying a lot of the same things Sydney said, but if like you said, that Sydney would turn away suitors and Tom is trying to bring them in. And so
Right.
there's
To
that
get her,
difference.
right.
But
To get her married off before she turns 21.
And I think she says that comment that, how does she word it, to Charlotte, where she says that he wants to be rid of her just as much as her guardian before did. And
And
Charlotte has to
Charlotte says
say
that Charlotte says, Sydney was more fond of you than you will allow.
yeah.
And she says, yes, that's possible, So she does acknowledge that, which is good.
And you can see that she is hurting because she does acknowledge it, but in kind of a angry way, because she says, I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, that's right.
But I do like that, watching the difference between how Tom is handling the situation or trying to be responsible with her, says something, and Mary has the understanding hand, but she's trying to back Tom on some of this stuff. But on top of that, we are able to see the brothers grieving in different ways, although Tom is kind of avoiding it, according to Arthur. But I was so moved by how Turlough portrayed Arthur in that scene when he was talking to Charlotte, and he said, sometimes, like, I get emotional in the road. He just did the part so well when he said, sometimes I go to the church and light a candle and weep like a baby, and I feel the better for it. Like, oh, I love Arthur. Like, I liked him before, but I love Arthur in this. His character growth is so good, and he credits it to being away from Diana, which that's what we theorized all last season, was Diana's enabling him to be worse.
Yeah. He says he feels so much better when he's returned without Diana, that he's trying to help Tom fill in for Sydney in terms of the town. Yeah, I think that his part is given a lot more depth in this
and I'm
series.
glad for it.
Yeah, I am too. And it's also wonderful that Georgiana is acknowledging how kindly Arthur treats her.
Yeah.
And how much, so their friendship has matured and grown, which is really good to see.
Yeah.
Because before she dismissed him a lot, even when he was being really kind to her. And now she seems to have realized it, which is very good. In the first series, I think it was the second episode, was when she acknowledged that because of her fortune, she needed taking care of.
Yeah.
So, and that's Mary's concern. as they go through the conversation about suitors and all that, she's concerned that she be protected, and that's why she has been interested in trying to find a suitable marriage for her.
And I think we're seeing things in Charlotte and Georgiana that, I mean, is not the standard then, where Georgiana has no desire to be married to anyone unless she can be in control of her money. And that was the standard. Charlotte doesn't want to have anything to do with marriage. And we see how that kind of exploded in shame and all that. And so there's these ideas from Georgiana and Charlotte that are surprising and a little shocking to Mary and even to other people in the town, that no, that's not, you need a husband, you need this. And they're bucking those ideals because they have independence now and they can rely on themselves now.
And they're not as naive.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the contrast with Allison, because Allison sort of has taken Charlotte's place as the wide-eyed, innocent, idealistic, marriage promoting. Although Charlotte never was said she was there to marry for money, but Allison clearly is.
Mm-hmm.
But we find that there's more reason for it because they've had 3 bad harvests. Their father, their financial situation has gone downhill. And when you're a farmer, that's how you live and die, is on your harvest. So
I do think that I get the sense that Allison has been this romanticized ideal for quite some time, because she loves the idea of love, but she also understands the necessity of getting married and being taken care of out of her father's house. So there's that twofold thing happening there. And I think that she reminded me a lot of Lydia Bennett, when she's so excited about the militia. Of course, I feel like I like her more than I like Lydia Bennett because Lydia Bennett's a brat and Allison's not a brat, but she did have her moments in this episode. And you're going to find that as we talk about these, we're talking about subject matter, so we might not necessarily go in order of things happening. So we might jump around depending on what subject we're talking about. So I'm going to jump ahead to every time Allison and Charlotte were in front of Colonel Lennox, and Allison tried to push that so hard, and she didn't have a care for sensitivity of what Charlotte's going through and what she's feeling. And maybe she doesn't want this, but she's pushing it because she has this romantic ideal of what it would be like to be a colonel's wife. And she's trying to help Charlotte be married, and she understands that, they need to be married, but she pushes it too hard.
And as a result, Charlotte goes and does exactly what Arthur said he would do when he was grieving Sydney. She goes and lights a candle in the church and grieves. One of the things we haven't mentioned, I think it's important to talk about, is that Georgiana is living with Reverend Hankins and his spinster sister that they had offered to be her chaperones, which is an interesting idea. I'll be interested to see why they chose that convention, as opposed to like living with the Parkers,
Probably because, I guess Charlotte is staying with the Parkers.
Charlotte and Allison are staying with the Parkers, but I don't know why it would be more acceptable for her to be chaperoned by them. But they had offered, and so that's how they ended up there. It's just interesting looking back at some of the fan fiction and how they had things turn out, which was different from this. But you also have the actors that you're going to have. I mean, to continue the roles that you're given. So we've spoken of the army being in town, but we haven't really talked about their arrival and who they are and how it came about. So do you want to talk about that now, or
do we really get told how it comes about, other than that Tom has arranged for the militia to camp there for the summer?
Oh yes,
I do know that Colonel Lennox is the head of this militia encampment, and he has honors and medals, and Tom loves him, and Arthur does not like the militia. And I know that we find out Edward is in the militia. We see, this is where we meet Colonel, or I don't know if he's a Colonel, Fraser. What's his, Lieutenant Fraser? What's his?
Captain Fraser.
Captain, is that what it is? Because it's Captain Carter.
Yeah, it's Captain Carter. I might have it written down. Um, you know, I honestly don't remember. So do you remember at all how they came to be encamped
No.
at? Okay, they do talk about it in episode 1. I just found my note on that. What happened was, because we hear Colonel Lennox say to Edward and that he thanks him for suggesting Sanditon
Oh yeah,
for their
that.
encampment.
I do remember that, yeah.
And Edward claims to his family, I mean, to Lady D and Esther, that it just happened this way. He didn't know that they were coming to Sanditon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was manipulation by Edward, and Esther realizes that. I mean, she
Yeah,
picks it
she
up.
sees through it right away.
Yeah, she is definitely not being fooled by Edward, at least yet anymore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they're there for the summer. They're in camp there, and it was suggested by Edward, who now has a military, what's the word I'm looking for? Not post, but
Commission?
commission. Thank you.
Technically
That,
he hasn't because he hasn't paid for it
but
yet.
right, he is acting, they're acting as though he has it, but he has not paid for it.
Mhm.
And I'm sure he thinks he's going to get the money from Lady D.
I think he thinks he's going to get it from Esther. I think
Mm.
originally he wanted it from Lady D, and that's why he suggested Sanditon. But now that Esther's there, because you see when he goes to Lady D's house and he's saying, "I had no idea, Aunt or Aunt, I had no idea that we were going to come here," and he's giving this spiel about how I've changed and I'm better. I don't know what I can do to convince you. And Lady D, I feel like she, for the most part, doesn't agree with him. But then you see breakfast the next day with Esther, and she's saying that the shock of disinheritance is stirred up remorse. No, it hasn't. But then we see him, he tells her, she says, stay away from, keep your distance, especially from Esther. And he immediately says, you have my word. And then immediately breaks it.
Oh
And
yeah,
when
he
he's
doesn't
talking
live.
to Esther, the way he's speaking to her about how I've been bereft without you, I've missed you, and saying, don't you miss me at all? And then the smirk on his face as he walks away and says, you'll never hear from me again. He thinks he's going to get it from Esther because he thinks he still has sway over her. He thinks he still has power over her.
Well,
like
he certainly is acting, he's trying to act the way he used to towards her.
Because I think he still has power over him. He thinks he does.
Maybe, boy, she is trying to make it very clear that he does not.
Mm-hmm. But Esther's always been strong-willed too. And I think she's always been strong. She's just been influenced by him and his power. And I think that he thinks if he returns to that, then he's got Esther in his hands.
That may be, but she is not blind to his faults any longer.
I love her. And
yeah.
Esther's always been my favorite, but I love this episode of her. It made me really, really sad to hear that, because, and this is echoed by a couple of the people that really hoped Esther would just have happiness. Now she's got this, I mean, a miscarriage at 5.5 months. That's insane for now. I can't imagine what a miscarriage at that stage back then meant.
Yeah.
And so that pain that she's feeling, and when she looks at Dr. Fuchs and says, I will swallow any pill, I will take any tincture, I will do anything. It broke my heart for her.
And it's interesting that we find this out only when she talks to Dr. Fuchs. She does not say that to Lady D. She doesn't tell her before that moment that she's lost a child.
She did, in a way. She didn't tell her how far along she was.
Right, but I mean, she did, but prior to that, Lady D was treating her like she just had never gotten pregnant.
It was in that conversation, yeah, when she said, what's your excuse? And then she saw her face and she said, and that's when Charlotte said, or not Charlotte, when Esther, to be fair, Charlotte is her real name. But when Esther said,
yes.
when Esther said, my husband and I thought it best that I come here to heal. And that's when Lady Denham realized, okay, you had a miscarriage. And
right,
she said the seaside won't be enough. And I was actually impressed that Lady Denham said the sea air won't be enough. And she said, Dr. Fuchs is a charlatan, but then she called him over anyway. So it just shows you how much she cares for Esther.
Right.
Which is really, really, really sweet to see.
And don't you love the scene where he's walking up 3 flights of stairs to get oh, it just cracked me up. I mean, it was a little sense of a bit of humor in the midst of a sad episode, and he tries to be honest with her. We find out that Georgiana is leading a sugar boycott that the Rankins have definitely bought into and are handing out flyers. And of course,
Oh, the Hankins?
What did I say?
Rankins?
Oh, the Hankins. the Hankins. And of course, Lady D just dismisses the whole thing, She's not giving up her sugar.
When after Edward leaves, you see her take 3 massive spoonfuls of sugar and dump it in her tea.
Yes. I love when Georgiana says to her when she's talking about how she doesn't think it would be effective for them to boycott sugar. And Georgiana says, I didn't realize how deprived you were.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I like that
was her pleasure
with her. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that it's during this parade of the military that's coming in that we see Allison and Charlotte sit down with Lady Denham. And I'm kind of surprised at how
Mary.
Yeah, Mary goes in the too. But I'm surprised at how Lady Denham says, I rather thought we'd seen the last of you. Like, I get her saying that, but I thought she had grown to like Charlotte a little bit. And I think she obviously had an inkling that she was with Sydney, or she had a thing with Sydney, or there was something that I think Lady Denham had some inkling that she had feelings for him. But her tone is what surprised me there, that I was like, oh, okay, so.
Right. Like, and you're still, you're still claiming you're not here to be married.
Yeah.
She gives her and then when
she's the one who says that unmarried women are pariahs of society.
Worthless pariah.
No one chooses to be unmarried.
Right.
And then she calls out Reverend Hankins' sister as an example.
Yes. Yeah. She's really very mean in that, with what she says there, but it is not atypical of what you would have heard from people at that time.
Absolutely.
And not even that many years ago.
And I mean, you hear it echoed in Allison and Mary, even when Charlotte says she wants to be a governess. So I mean, it's even something that her own sister has the same ideals of. So
right.
But then you see on the other side of the veranda that they're sitting in, Allison saying, you got to Esther, you met your husband here. Do you have any advice on how to do it? And I love Esther's response and her, I don't know if it's just Charlotte Spencer that I love so much that makes me love Esther even more, but the way Charlotte Spencer portrays Esther is perfection. And so when she says, disdain his every word, and if he persists, marry him, and that smirk, that smirk that she has in the end, where that she just has such delight in how she found her husband and what kind of man he is. And it just, even thinking about him brings that out. And I love that Charlotte Spencer adds that to the character, because facial expressions aren't scripted and body language isn't scripted. So I just love how she put that out there.
No, she is really an incredible actress. And yeah, I mean, it's such a great line, and there's actually so many great lines, and they move so quickly on that if you aren't paying attention, you really miss them.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I loved about season 1, and I think we're getting again season 2, is the depth of stuff that's going on. That you have to pay attention, or it's worth a rewatch. As I said, I've watched it 3, maybe 4 times, and I still, I mean, I'm getting better about remembering what happened. But as you can tell, I've moved into episode 2 because we were able to watch it. For those of you who haven't yet, you'll be glad you get to see it when you get to see it. But yeah, it's well worth a rewatch. And
I do have to say that it was really difficult for me to go from binge watching season 1 over and over and over again to, oh crap, now I gotta wait a week.
Yeah.
I want to watch the next one right now. I don't want to wait. I like seeing Arthur show an emotion about the military too, right before the parade comes into town. It happens when they're on their way to the parade, and how did he word it? He said something like, he's gonna miss it. He's gonna skip it to go with Georgiana to have tea, and not everyone is excited about the militia coming to town. But then when he and Georgiana are talking to Lockhart, he says, I wrote it down, but I have so many notes. I don't know where it is, but he said something about how, remind me how he said this. Why should we effuse over a few swaggerly, oh man.
I didn't write it down.
Okay, right here. He says, swaggering brutes, he calls them. Why should we be so excited over a few swaggering brutes simply because they killed a few Frenchmen? And I want to know why he hates the militia so much. There's something there, and I cannot wait to find out the deep, because I feel like this is going to be a running theme. We see it when Lennox goes to Tom's house, and Tom's like, I hope that you'll find a permanent barracks here. And Arthur's like, whoa, wait, let's not be too hasty here. So there's something.
Well, Arthur, one of the things we see Arthur doing, he's sort of picked up the vision for Sanditon, and he's promoting the idea of a theater in Sanditon. Theater, the Royal Sanditon, I think is what he called it. And Tom doesn't say an outright no, but he's like, well, we can't be speculating. And yet Arthur repeats Tom's words, well, speculators speculate. And Tom says, that sounds like me.
Yeah. I think that Arthur actually, he says at one point to Charlotte, I am no replacement for Sydney, but I'm doing my best to help Tom. Now, Sydney's the one who said they need entertainment. There's not enough here. And Arthur is going in the way of, we need a theater, we need a pagoda, we need things to entertain. And that's where his direction is going to bring people in. And he's kind of picking up Sydney's vision. I don't even think he realizes he's doing it. It's just, these are all things that are inside Arthur to do. And you see that Tom, because this is where we find out that Eliza's still well. We find out in the beginning when he says that he's learned his lesson from flying too close to the sun. He's not going to make any risky moves. He's not going to gamble with the finances of the town. He's not going to do too much like he did before. And this is where we find out that Eliza is still, she owns over half, or at least a good
large stake. And we learn it really from Lady D, who is upset about not being she's supposed to be the primary investor. And yet Sydney's widow owns, a lot of the town. And that's when Tom says that it's his intention to pay off the loan.
So do you think that Arthur's main thing with the militia is that it would turn into a military town rather than his idea for the arts in the town? Do you think that's his main issue?
I mean, at this point I do, unless we hear something different. But because we have no other background to tell us something different. There's nothing we've seen yet of Arthur that would explain that. I mean, he's just more of a
arts and leisure kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. Arts and leisure, not a military, not a young, strong, virile man kind of attitude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, and he's not really interested in women the way other men are. So,
and we see it's during this parade when he goes off with Georgiana that Georgiana says to him, I wish you would marry me, Arthur.
Right.
And he tells her that he's going to look for a kindred. And obviously, I think this is a writing. They obviously wrote it this way on purpose, where he says, I'll look for a kindred spirit. And then they run into Lockhart. And Lockhart says, and I happen to fancy the French too.
Right. And he had already run into Lockhart some, and then later on they form a friendship, and so he's promoting Lockhart to.
But that doesn't happen until episode 2.
That's right. Although he's already met Lockhart prior to his visit with Georgiana, and so I think that's sort of in the back of his mind, because he's the non-military person in the town. He's the unconventional person in the town.
And I think Arthur gravitates to those people who are more, like Sydney called himself an outlier. I think he gravitates to those people who are more on the fringe. He doesn't like to meet with, like, everyone loves the militia. Arthur and Georgiana and Charles don't. And he gravitates to those people who aren't like I guess in today's, you would say the popular ones. He doesn't gravitate towards the popular ones.
Yeah, yeah.
And I liked it about him.
So we did not talk about the fact that Charlotte and Georgiana and Allison walk into the base.
I didn't like that
walk
either.
onto the encampment, huh?
I didn't like that either.
You didn't like they did that?
Yeah, I don't think that would have been done.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. It was just an excuse for her to meet Lennox, well, for them to meet those then and his two aides.
And again, with a
And-
shirtless dude coming out of the tent to meet three women like that, I don't like that.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm the only one, but
Well, it
there
would
isn't
be-
a need for it, and it would have been scandalous.
Well, it would be interesting to find out. Of course, they walked in on them. They, the women shouldn't have walked in there.
I agree.
That was a bold, unconventional thing to do. And so the fact that they found him shirtless was kind of their fault.
He walked out to greet them shirtless, though. He was in his tent, saw them, and came out shirtless.
And put on his shirt. Yeah.
While talking with them. I think it was just an excuse to see dudes without shirts on.
Maybe this would be a good conversation to have with Paula. I mean, I think if she thought it was really objectionable, she would have told them that, although it may have come about during filming and it wasn't in the script, so you don't know.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to get her take on it.
I agree.
So anyway, but they go there and meet them. And then
this is pre-parade, so they haven't even gone through the town yet.
Right. And then the parade happens, and we see again Charlotte's normal character when she rescues this child that had run in front of the horse from being hurt.
Yeah.
And that's our introduction to the children that she may be teaching as a governess.
My only critique there, and I loved these episodes, so I know that I'm saying things I have problems with, but overall I like the episodes. How in the world did Charlotte get to that spot so fast? Because the processional had already moved fairly far down from where she was, and she happened to see it from where she was. But because I rewound it and I paused it, Leo ran quite a bit away from where Charlotte was, and she happened to see. I don't even know how she heard the commotion before it happened, but she got up and started running before it really happened. And then,
she probably just, sometimes you can see this situation that's setting itself up that you're concerned it's going to happen. And I mean, I've done that before, gone and intervened in a situation that I could see developing, and I would have stopped had it not developed, but I don't know, because they don't give us a wide enough view to see it exactly.
And I think that was why it bugged me, is because we didn't, the way it was shot, it was like, how is that possible?
Or at least the way it was edited.
Yeah, exactly. The way it was edited. Yeah.
So
that was my only critique from there. And also, why did no one else care that this happened? Like, the colonel stopped and looked and then kept going. And then afterwards you see that he knew who saved her. He knew what happened. And none of the other bystanders stopped to help Charlotte. No one stopped to care. And it was like, wow, Charlotte is the only person with a heart right now. That's
not the first time we've seen that.
I know. And then it was also weird that she carried Leo all the way. No man saw her to offer to help or anything. Yeah. And it just, obviously it's showing Charlotte's character more, diving more into that. But I was just, I was frustrated at the men in that town that had to walk past her and watch her struggling to carry this child, and no one's like, she's got it. We're gonna let her go on her own.
Yeah, we don't see Tom, but we know Tom isn't known for stepping in and helping in situations like that.
Yeah.
And so she takes the children to Trafalgar House to begin with, and then Mary generously offers for her to use the carriage to take them home.
It's also where we find out that Leo is a girl, not a boy.
And not a boy, although she had saluted the soldiers from behind, so you assumed she was dressed like a boy, which is part of the reason why she needs a governess. But they don't, so she takes them to their home, and the children are they're not very grateful either. And they just run out of the carriage immediately.
I think they're running to hide.
That's probably true. And she goes to the door and talks to the housekeeper and explains what happened, because she wants to be sure the child gets the care she needs. And that's when she finds out that they're in need of a governess.
She also finds out, this is where we also find out that Colburn has an issue with the militia, because and this is dived into more in episode 2, but where Mrs. Whitley, is that her name? Whitley?
I don't remember.
I think it's Whitley. But she says Mr. Colburn expressly forbid them from going anywhere near the militia.
Yeah.
So there's an indication that there's a problem.
There is some kind of conflict, yeah.
But the other thing I wanted to mention is that Augusta says that she's been living there for 16 months and 11 days. So we're given notice that that's how long her parents have been dead, whether it's just one or both. But Augusta's pain and manifests in hatred of everyone and everything. And it just I think the actress does a really good job of portraying pain and anger.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's really good that way. And so then we're back at Trafalgar House, and Mary and Tom and Allison and Charlotte and Arthur are having tea. And Tom talks about that Colburn is a miser, a recluse, and owns not one quality I admire. And then Colonel Lennox comes to check on what happened to the child that Charlotte rescued. He sits down and has tea with them. And that's when you get the impression that Lennox has some history with Colburn too. Or is it later?
It's later.
Okay, I mixed it up.
But Tom says that the reason he doesn't like Colburn is because he has fought his improvements at every stage.
Right. He wanted it to remain a fishing village, is what he said.
And we also find out that maybe Colburn's history might have been that he became this way when his wife died, because Mary says, he became a recluse once his wife died. Arthur says her death there's never been a reason found out for her death. But it's
never been explained.
I think we're going to see some sort of, I think it's for Colburn, I think it's all going to go back to the death of his wife somehow.
Could be. And I think his wife died in childbirth.
That's my assumption, but we don't really know.
We don't know, just from the comments that we hear from Leonora, thank you. I was having trouble with that.
And this is what we find out, instead of finding out his issues with Colburn, this is where Allison basically attacks Charlotte to Lennox, and because Lennox gives her compliments. And I mean, Lennox is obviously in the barracks when the three walk through the military base. Charlotte is flirting with Lennox a little bit, and whether she means to or not, she is. And so when he's immediately attracted to her. He comes back and he's like, wow, you have, what did he say? Smart courage and quick thinking is what he said.
Yeah. Yes, I don't remember the exact words, but yeah, I think you're right.
And Allison keeps saying, oh, isn't that what you need in a wife? And just being really cruel to Charlotte. And
Allison sort of is the one who gets the information that Lennox isn't married, doesn't have a wife. And and that's when Charlotte leaves and goes to the church to light a candle. And then when she comes back to Trafalgar House, Allison is very repentant for having said what she said and greets her, but she still keeps up about that we have to marry.
Yeah. And I think that one thing she said is, we came here, I was hoping coming here would put the memories to rest, but it seems they've stirred them up. And Charlotte says, it just made me more clear. And that's when the next scene is we find out her telling Mary and Allison, I'm going to be a governess. And they both lose their minds. And Mary's trying to coach her that this is a last resort. You don't ever choose this. You don't ever actually want to do this. This is wrong. And Allison is saying, I won't have a spinster for a sister. This won't do. We can't do this. Right. Very, very both angry and upset. And Charlotte is trying to convince them that, what does she say to Allison? She says, I will never put myself, I can never again put myself in the power of any man.
Of a man.
That means no marriage. And
he says, yeah, she says, I realized I can never again put myself in a man's power.
She said it's not just what is the farmer's name that her dad wants her to marry. It's not just Roy, whatever his name is. We'll say it's Roy. It's not just Roy. It's not just Lennox. It's no man. I can't marry anyone. And I get where she's coming from. I think that she's speaking out of pain. She doesn't want to experience this kind of pain again. And I think that that's where she feels that she's lost some of her power, because I mean, in season 1, Charlotte came there for adventure and she got it. And Charlotte came there for having some freedom, and she got that. Sydney didn't bind her. Sydney never tried to control her. So I think it's just the pain that she experienced at the loss that she's speaking out of. And Allison does speak sense here. She is talking sense that they need marriage to survive. That's how it was. And yes, you could be a governess, but it does put you lower in the pagan society. And it's not a lot of money. And you do have to be, I mean, that's just a different sort of power you're giving yourself over to, because what if your employer could fire you at a moment's notice without any real reason? And then you're in big trouble. So it's different. It's a scarier place to be a governess or be the master of your own self as a woman then.
Right. And really, when we think back about Jane Austen, who never married and became a writer, you know, to try and partially help support herself. But yeah, it's reflective of, you know, the person who started this story.
Absolutely.
So, and Mary says this is another key point, I think, is Mary says to Charlotte, you're allowed to grieve him. And Charlotte says,
yep,
he has a widow. It isn't my place. That is heartbreaking.
That I actually cried at that part.
Yeah.
She's holding all of this. And I think we're going to see it come out in, I hope, a healing way eventually. But she's holding all of this pain and all this grief and all this torment in at having lost him. And even Tom at one point says in front of her, I'm just glad Sydney has had some happiness with Eliza. And the look on Mary's
I know,
face,
I could have killed him.
And Tom is so oblivious to this. And I don't know how, but Mary obviously knows. And the look on Mary's face when she looks at Charlotte is like, what? And we see Mary be compassionate. And Mary's always compassionate. We see her have the boldness to because they never really talked about it outright. And so for her to say that, I was talking to someone else. I don't remember. I think it was on our page. And they said, that was the one moment I thought, Charlotte, for once in your life, don't be so good. Just grieve him. Don't be, because even in her last thing, you can't say you don't love her. You've agreed to marry. You must make her happy. Like, don't be so concerned about being good all the time. Let this be the one situation where you feel what you feel.
Right.
And it's okay. Yeah. And so it broke my heart that she was constraining herself in that way, and that Mary saw it. And I'm glad Mary spoke to it.
Right. I agree with you. There's a couple of things that I want to ask you about. What did you think about the fact that they showed Georgiana looking at a picture of Otis?
She's obviously still in love with him, but I think that's part of the reason why she's turning away suitors, is because she's like Charlotte. Because I think they're drawing a lot of parallels between Charlotte and Georgiana. We see that they both want to be independent and they both want to have the power of themselves. And I think that where Charlotte is remembering the pain of losing Sydney, I think Georgiana is not only still in love with Otis, but she's remembering the pain of what he did to her. And so I think that's why she's like, no, I'm not suffering any fools. I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm not giving myself to anybody again, because the last time I did, it turned out that he was just taking my money. He did do something to me that was terrible. And so I think that they're drawing those parallels between them. And you even see right before Charlotte goes to talk to Colburn, Georgiana's walking with her. And I wanted to bring this up too, because there's two things in that's I wanted to touch on. One is where Georgiana's kind of slipping back into her immaturity role, where she said, I thought you were coming here to be my friend. I thought you were coming here to be with me. Okay, you of all people should understand why Charlotte wants to go out on her own and be in her own power. But then she says, I do understand. I wrote down exactly what she said. She says, I do understand. Sydney and I were hardly friends, yet even I feel unmoored. I can only imagine how you must feel. And the fact that Georgiana gave her the grace to say that,
Yeah.
I thought showed a great deal of growth in Georgiana, because I mean, last season it was the exact opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm very happy that she's matured,
Mm-hmm.
that this character has.
So
Yeah.
I think that was what her looking at Otis was her in her maturity, remembering what she thought was love and how she still feels that way, and she still feels betrayed and hurt and in pain, that she's using that to remind herself of why she's not just going to marry whoever's pushed at her.
Right, right. So it's interesting when Charlotte goes to Hyrick Park to apply to be the governess.
I didn't realize that was the name of the manor.
Yes. And they showed it in the closed captions. I was fortunate to have caught it. And
this is the first time I've ever watched Sanditon without the subtitles on.
Yeah, it helps for things like this. So she goes to apply for governess, and the housekeeper shows her in, introduces her, tells her this is a young woman that brought the girls home from the parade. And he just immediately, with hardly looking at her or looking up from what he's doing, starts drilling her on math, geography, and French.
Real quick interview, rapid fire.
That the start of it, and then he gives the housekeeper something to put in the mail, and he goes around and sits down. I mean, leans against the desk, has her sit down, and then they start talking. And he talks about what he thinks she needs, the girls need. I mean, discipline, and not so much about book learning, but learning to be young ladies,
But first he asks her, because when they first sit down, he has her sit down. He asks her, he says something along the lines of, "You've met them and that hasn't deterred you? What did you think of them?" Right. And she says, I love Charlotte's response, because I really think this is how Charlotte feels. And she says that Augusta has a sharp wit.
Right.
And Leonora is, how does she say it? Keen imagination.
Right. And then he says,
so that feral and insolent.
Right. They're feral and what did you say? Insolent?
Feral and insolent, he called them.
Yeah.
And she said, if I meant that, I would have said that. And so
exactly.
I love that Charlotte brings this beautiful view to Sanditon and to the people around her, where she sees beyond the circumstance, she sees beyond the surface, and she gives people the benefit of the doubt. So her pain has not altered that. What happened with Sydney hasn't altered that. It has made her a little more cautious in her own life, but it is, I think she gravitates towards the people she can see in pain. And I think that might be one of the reasons why she wants to go back there. You see in the carriage when she's going back with Leo and Augusta, her goal is to give them some relief and to find out where their pain is coming from. And I think some part of her, and again, this is my assumption, but I think some part of her gravitates toward that because she can help them with that. She understands pain. And I'm not going to say what she says about that because it's an episode 2, but she sees really that they do have wit and they do have a good imagination, rather than the negative to it, because she can explain it away, as even when she said in the carriage, both of your mothers are dead.
Yeah.
She gets where the attitudes are coming from. So she's able to see past that. And I love that he calls it out in her. And that's when he says that they need a firm hand and discipline.
Right. And then, I don't remember if it's before he goes around the desk or after, but he says, I assume you have references from your last position. And she says, no, but I have been helping my father teach my 11 brothers and sisters. And he says, oh, you're here under false pretenses. There's a lot of banter between them.
Yeah. He's very quick.
And then he is very quick. And I think that I can't think of the actor's name, but I think he's doing a good job for training this.
Is it Ben Lloyd Wright or Ben Lloyd Hughes?
Yeah, it's Ben Lloyd
Hughes, I think.
Hughes. Yeah. Which is ironic that he's in this because he was in
Divergent with
with Theo James. But and then I love that after they have this sort of discussion that's sort of a little bit of a fight. She says, why should your girls be deprived of an education because of their sex?
Mhm.
You know, she just lays it right out there, and then she storms out.
But before she stormed, I wanted to point out what he says, because
Okay.
there is something deeper here that I think we're going to dive into in season 2. When he says, trust me, Miss Haywood, I know what happens when a woman falls short of society's expectations.
Yeah.
That is going to be key moving forward. I think it's key with what, I can't say it, it's in episode 2. There's some things that come on episode, Janice and I have already seen episode 2, much like a lot of people who have PBS Masterpiece on Amazon. So there's things that we know from there, but this is going to play out, I think, in a greater way. And there's something there, and it's also promising intrigue that's coming.
Yeah.
And so we get that dramatic there.
There's definitely a history we don't know.
And Charlotte says that women should have their minds open to the world around them, not be taught to be meekly submissive.
Right. Yeah. So then we've seen this dog sitting by him under the desk. And it's interesting that when she storms out of the building, the dog follows her, and that dog is like a smaller Scottish deerhound, or possibly a lurcher, which is a combination of a couple of sighthound breeds. But and she stops and talks to the dog, and then the dog turns around and goes back, and she pets it. And it's interesting, I know someone on social media says, what do you think of the significance of the dog is? Well, obviously the dog was accepting of her.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And before I want to say what happens, I want to say the end for the end. So we're gonna go in order for right now.
Oh, right.
The next scene is
right. That's when Georgiana observes the army on the beach and grabs Allison, and she borrows the carriage of the man she had just said she would rather be boiled alive than marry. And
I mean, that is like the most immature thing.
Yeah. She hasn't arrived yet, that's for sure. And they ride out on the carriage and drive around the soldiers, and then the wheel breaks and the carriage overturns, and Captain Carter runs to Allison, who wakes up as he's rolling her over, and now she thinks he's her savior. Right.
Yeah, I call it, my notes say, racing idiotic circles around them. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So like it is in line with Georgiana, and so I'm not criticizing the writers, but I was just like, it's so ridiculous what you're doing right now, and it's so immature what you're doing right now, but it makes sense for those characters. It's in line with what they would. So I'm not criticizing the writers on that. It was just like such a stupid thing to do, and the circles that they were running around them. But I did want to point out that Captain Fraser was very, whatever his title is, I'll have to, when I rewatch season 2 or episode 2, I'll figure out what his title is. But Fraser noticed something was going to happen before everybody else did.
Right.
And he was very intently watching it and got concerned. And he was one of the first to reach them too. He just went to Georgiana, and Carter went to Allison. But I'm pointing that out for a reason that I will talk about next week.
Yeah. And it's actually at this point, then the next scene is when Tom calls Mary, and we think maybe they've come back from this incident. That's what I thought. But no, it was Tom and Arthur are reading this letter that they've gotten, that Sydney was taking care of, not his own affairs, but Georgiana's.
Yeah.
So that's our first hint that that's what's happening.
And there was someone that suggested in the group too that maybe he went to Antigua to do that because he was avoiding his marriage. He was already married.
Oh, yeah.
He was avoiding his wife, and he just happened to die. And this is where we find out how Sydney died, because Tom says if he had never gone, or is it earlier when he says if he had never gone to Antigua, he would have been spared the yellow fever and we would still have him. Maybe that happened earlier in the episode. I don't think it happened right here.
It was earlier in the episode, but he did say it.
Yeah. So that's coming up. We're going to find out more about, because this is not going to be something that's dropped. So I like that they're keeping Sydney alive in a way that we can tolerate, because we wouldn't have been able to tolerate it if he was living somewhere and not with Charlotte. So we're still getting glimpses of him. I hope that for Charlotte's sake, it's not like constantly talked about, but we do need to know. I mean, they set up this intrigue for Sydney being there. They set up the intrigue with that letter that I desperately want to know what all of the parts of the letter say. And it's driving me crazy that so much that stupid card blocked out so much of the letter. But I think these are things we're going to see. So at the end of this episode, tying it back to Sydney, Colburn meets Charlotte on the cliffs, which is where she first meets Sydney. And he's on his horse and he's moody and brooding, just like Sydney was moody and brooding. And so Colburn meets her on the cliffs and says, "You didn't wait to hear my answer." And she said,
Right.
"I thought I did." And he said, "You start on Monday if you still want it," and then just rides away. Doesn't wait for her answer at all. He's just like, "All right, I got you. I'm done. Just bye now."
Yeah, if the job is yours if you still want it. So you start Monday. Yeah, that's exactly what he said. So there's something else we have not covered that I think we really need to talk about.
Okay.
And that is the 2 times we hear the voiceover of Sydney's voice.
That was in my notes. Yep. Did that surprise you?
Yes and no.
It surprised me.
I mean, it did.
I don't know if it surprised me so much as it just like hit me in my heart.
Well, and I think that's what it was intended to do. I mean, one of the things you do when you remember people that have passed is that you loved is some of their words.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't normally actually hear their voice, which was what we did here. But the 2 times that we hear the Sydney voiceover was when she enters Trafalgar House,
which we find out is the same house. It just obviously looks different because it's a different set. But we had theorized last season that they moved to different space.
Right. I was thinking more like they remodeled it, but they just decided to make it a little grander than it was the original building was.
Yeah.
Especially the staircase area, that is really the big difference. But and the rooms are larger. But what he says is the thing he says to her at the end of, no, not at this point.
When she's walking through the house.
She hears is what he said when at the end of episode 7 about being with her.
About being the truest self. Being the truest self happens at the church. When she's walking through the house, she hears the last thing she heard from him in that house.
Okay, you're right. You're right.
Which was, "Believe me if there's any other way."
Yeah, you're right.
That whole speech.
That's exactly. Yep.
And then she ends in front of his portrait.
Yes, the portrait that still doesn't do him justice.
No, at all. But this is another thing I like about Arthur here. She turned to Arthur and said, "I hope Mary gave you my sympathies." And Arthur teared up, and he still has a smile on his face, but you could tell he was emotional. And he said, "Yes, she did. I thank you." And he just didn't know what to do with himself because he was just so terribly sad about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, hearing his voice was definitely took you back. And that's another reason why trying to recast that
was a mistake.
Character would just, his voice is such a big part of what the part he plays and whatever that part is. And you just would have a very hard time duplicating that.
Yeah. And honestly, the people who are fighting for recast, they would have been mad at the recast. So there's no replacing Theo James. He was Sidney Parker. That's it.
Yes. And Justin Young and his team were put in really, an impossible situation to make everybody happy.
Absolutely.
There's no way to do it. And so, I think they've done the best job they could. I think they're treating Sydney, the character, with
honor and grace.
And honor and grace. Exactly. That's right. Yeah.
They made him a hero in the end too. I mean, he went to Antigua to safeguard Georgiana. It's not like I'm sure he was avoiding Eliza's marriage too, but he went there to be a guardian responsible for his charge, ensuring that she was taken care of and well off. And
yeah, he's still high character event,
Mhm.
still standing up for
Yeah.
her. Yeah, I agree.
Followed through with what he said he was going to follow through with. He clearly was providing funds for Sanditon, as Eliza now holds a large stake in it. So he honored every commitment he made. He went above that. And so I think that they were in an impossible situation, but they can't force anyone to do anything. And they gave us what we wanted, which was a season 2 and a season, I mean, beyond that, they gave us a season 3 as well. So I think that they gave us exactly what we wanted in the only way they could to honor all the characters and honor all the stories that we fell in love with. They honored Sydney and Charlotte here because we're seeing Charlotte grieve. It's not just like Sydney never existed for her. We're watching the grief play out in her. And I think that's honoring Sydney's character because they're putting that in there. They're having her not only remember, but they're having it, the pain of losing Sydney play out in every aspect of how she's living now.
Right.
I think that's honoring him too.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And one of the interviews I heard with Justin Young, he was telling sort of how everything came about. And he said, right after it played in the US, after Sanditon season 1 played in the US, they immediately were talking about the possibility of trying to pull it back together. And he put together a case for doing another season. And what he did involved, the continuing story like everybody wanted for Charlotte and Sydney. And then when they found out that Sydney they sat down and met with Theo. It was very amicable, but he just decided it had been too long and he did not want to go forward with that, that he was pretty happy with the way it ended because it was not a fairy tale ending. And they went, so Justin assumed that then it was over. There was nothing they were going to be able to do. But when they talked to PBS said, well, wait a minute, isn't there another direction you could go? Yeah. And that's when they came up with what they produced and what got green lighted. But he was as surprised as anyone that they were willing to go forward with it.
Yeah. I think when I talked to Theo's agent, they said he's moved on. He's done. And you have to give the writers credit for continuing on with this story and giving us hope for more, because I mean, we hate it, and the reason we wanted the Sid lot is because it's an Austen ending. But right. The thing is, you look at all of Austen's stories, there are a myriad of ways to have an Austen ending. It's not only one strict way. There's still opportunity for Austen ending, but also we get this piece of reality where that's very likely how it would have happened then. Right. So it's based in reality. And Paula Byrne, in my interview with her, said over and over again, Jane Austen was a realist. So we have that aspect of it, but then we still are given this. So not only do we have that reality of that, but then we're given this hope of something to come after that pain and after the heartache. And I think that's a more beautiful story, to have that hope after pain. I mean, that's what we all really want.
So I'm curious to know when it was you talked to Theo's agent. Do you remember?
It was March of last year.
March of 2021. And
March. Yeah, it was March. Because that's when I started the podcast. Started it a year ago. And I messaged the biggest cast members first.
Right. And I think they got the green light to go with the other version in December
January.
2021.
Yeah, January, December, something like that. Because that was when, I think it was in December when I don't know how these people find this information, but they do. And like, I give them so much credit for finding this stuff. But you remember when they first came out with, they have a scheduling, they have a building that they're renting, or there was something that went out where they had a permit that they got out.
Right. And also there was, on that production list that it was listed on there.
Yeah.
For a Sanditon 2.
Yeah.
And so ever since that, I've have an email subscription to that list, and I've seen about some films, things that are going to happen. like another, continuing episodes or another film on a particular theme, which is interesting.
Yeah. And I think like there was Amazon put out a tweet asking what is the one show you binged the most, and the Sanditon sisterhood replied, the one you missed out on. Because they didn't pick it up and they let it sit for 2 years, and so that was that. But then today there was Paula Byrne was talking about the situation, because someone was talking to her about it, and she was discussing, this is what we did. We can't please everyone. We can't please the ones who want them back. And someone had said that they groomed us for this ending that we never got to get. It's not what they did. They wrote a story hopeful for what was to come. It didn't pan out that way, so they had to switch gears. There was no nefarious plan. They didn't lie to us ever. Andrew Davies said if it was continued, yes, he would like to give us the Sid lot.
Right.
But that's not a lie. That's what they wanted to do. They just couldn't do it. And
I also found out that Sydney was not under a continuing contract. He was contracted for season 1, and they would, had it been renewed immediately, they felt like they would get him to renew, a season 2. But because it was dropped, he didn't break any contracts.
No.
So,
and I think that if you are watching this episode of this podcast episode, and you are one who is strictly Sid lot, and you are one who said you weren't going to watch season 2 because Theo James is there, Sydney's not there, I just want to encourage you to give it a shot, because it is hopeful, and there is still Austin ending that's going to happen here. I can see in the first 2 episodes how many, and I actually wrote that in my notes, there's a lot of different Austin novels that are being inspired here. So there is going to be an Austin ending. We've got different characters that represent different parts of Jane Austen's world.
Yeah, that's right.
This isn't an Austen work anymore. It was an Austen inspired, I call it, but they still pulled what they could from her world to make it very Austen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I one other thing, just a footnote, and that is, I like the fact that they mentioned James Stringer.
Oh yeah, he's in London. Yep. That was in my notes.
He's in London and working.
He's going to be a master architect.
Yes. Yes. So it's nice that they at least referred to him.
Yeah. And like we said, this is the first, you have to, if you are one of those who are like, no, I'm not going to watch it, get past the first 2 episodes, because these are builder episodes that give you all the answers that you need to know. They're setting up I feel like the first episode is mainly tying up ends from season 1 and beginning to set the stage. And I feel like episode 2 is setting things in motion for what's going to happen.
Right. And episode 1 introduces the new characters.
Yeah. So
I agree.
Go past episode 2. I know that episode 3 is going to come out for those of you who have Amazon Masterpiece or PBS Masterpiece on Amazon. And I think PBS Passport.
Right. PBS Passport.
You'll get episode 3 on Sunday. If you're not, you get it in 2 weeks. So go past the first 2 episodes. Really give these writers a chance, because they did this for us. They did this for you. They didn't have to come back and write this. Yeah, they're getting paid, but they did it because we wanted it. So get past the first 2 episodes. And if you still don't like it, don't watch it. But you got to stop harping on Sydney.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that can be done.
Right.
We get it. We all agree. We all hate that he wasn't there. We all hate that Charlotte's not with him. But what's done is done. And he's not coming back. There's no option. It's nobody's fault. So
right. And I really want to, and I really appreciate all the actors that chose to come back.
Yeah.
And fill these characters again. I really do.
Absolutely. And I don't have any ill will for the ones who didn't return either.
No,
because to us, it's a glimpse or just a tiny, because we've been binge watching it. So it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it's been a long time between the ending of filming for season 1 and the beginning of filming for season 2. It was a long time.
And this happened all in the midst of a pandemic.
Exactly. So it's nobody's fault who didn't return. You shouldn't have any ill will towards them. They're people, they're adults, they have lives, they have things that happen in there. It's okay. It's okay to grieve. And I'm not telling anyone to not grieve, but we have to stop attacking each other. We have to, and I only say this because I was on Twitter this morning and there was a whole bunch of like people attacking. Like, let's just love
Yeah.
Sanditon. Let's just love these
Yeah.
people who are there.
Yeah. And it's amazing to think that they've persevered through all of this. If anything, I hope ITV and some of the British companies have realized they need to wait till these shows go to the US before they make decisions.
For sure.
Yeah.
So to sum up, we see Sidney dies in Antigua. He's there for Georgiana. Militia comes to Sanditon. Arthur doesn't like it. Tom wants him to stay. Charlotte decides to become a governess, to be power of her own self, in charge of her own destiny. Georgiana is refusing all suitors for the same reason. Edward's back in town. He's trying to scam money out of either Esther or Lady Denham. He's the one who convinced the militia to come. Leonore and Augusta are the two people that Charlotte is going to be governess over. We're going to see a lot of fun with that. I think that feels, and it's funny because that one, it feels Jane Austen-esque, but it also feels very Jane Eyre-esque, the Colburn house. So we've got a lot of intrigue there. We've got intrigue with Colburn saying he knows what happens to women when they fall short of society's expectations. We've got intrigue with what was Sidney writing. We've got intrigue with those kids who are going to give Charlotte a run for her money. We'll see in the next episode.
And
we've got Lennox,
Esther,
who's got some issues. We've got Esther, who, the other thing, we see Esther also writing a letter to Babington saying, the doctor says there's every hope that we'll conceive again. And that is not what the doctor said.
Right.
So she's heartbroken, this miscarriage. She decides to extend her stay to be with Lady Denham and not leave her alone with Edward. And she's trying to find a way to give her husband a child. And that's a beautiful thing.
Lots of stories to look forward to.
So there's great things. We got Allison and Captain Carter, who they both fancy themselves in love. And I have things to say about next week's episode. That. So tune in next week where we're going to go over episode 2. And we'll give you a recap, a rundown, all of our thoughts. If you feel we've missed something, let us know. If you think that we are wrong, let us know that too. You can reach out to me at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. You can also join our Facebook group. We've had a lot of people joining lately, which makes sense. You can find us there on the Sanditon Chronicles, Sanditon Family Fan Club. You are allowed to post spoilers on there until Friday. They have to have a spoiler notice, but we do have a thread where we're all talking about what happened. So you can come on over there. You want some discussion? We have almost 2,000 members there that are discussing things. I know there's some other Sanditon Facebook groups where you can join in the discussion. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram under the Sanditon Chronicles. So join us next week, and you can look forward to that. So this is our season 2, going along with Sanditon season 2, and we have some fun things coming up for you, hopefully. So till next week, we'll see you. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.